It's July 10th, and here we are looking at the newest draft, the July 9th draft of the listing agreement. We're waiting for the release of the new listing agreement, the new buyer representation agreement, other forms, and CAR has issued this letter to members as of July 9th, and they're pushing back the release to July 24th. This is at least the second delay that we've seen. And of course, they say full compliance by August 17th. Actually, the MLS is going to remove that cooperating broker compensation field August 13th. But still, with July 24th for these new forms, we have plenty of time to get used to them. But there's something else I want to draw your attention to. Right here, I have it highlighted, and they even say they want to draw your attention to one change in particular. Now, I'll read this one little line here. We have made the decision to remove the listing broker's offer of compensation from these forms. Most notably, that'll affect the listing agreement. While we recognize that the offer of compensation remains legal and valid because it's within your legal right as a listing broker to offer a portion of your commission to the buyer's agent, they're acknowledging that. They still are saying that this changes what they believe in the best interests of members and consumers. So what does this mean for the listing agreement? Well, this draft that came out yesterday, July 9th, is worse than the earlier draft. Now, here we are looking at it. All the changes are in red, and we'll focus primarily on the compensation because that's the most important part. That's the change that's having the largest effect because it's all stemming from this NAR settlement. So you see a lot of this is formatting change that you see in red. And it's the same thing, more or less, that you have on the old listing agreement. Now, keep in mind, on the old listing agreement, when a listing broker wrote in the commission amount, it was the gross number, like 5%, that encompassed the buyer's agent compensation. And so here, we start with this advisory, and we're going to see advisories like this all over the place in all the new forms going forward because, again, we're erring on the side of caution, and there needs to be advisories telling consumers, hey, commissions are not fixed by law, they're entirely negotiable, and letting consumers know some advisory verbiage for protection. Now, we get down here to the compensation of seller's broker. This is line C1, and this is only the seller's side of the transaction. So like I was saying, in the old listing agreement, you were charging a fee, let's say 5%, for all sides of the transaction. And it didn't matter if you're dual agent or what you're offering the buyer's agent, you're charging that gross amount up front, that 5%. Well, this percentage is only what the listing broker is going to get paid. And you put in that percentage or flat fee or whatever. You can check this box for a compensation schedule if you really want to complicate things. Okay, so we see here, this is what the listing broker is going to charge. Simple enough, right? But what happens if a buyer walks in and is unrepresented? They walk into your open house and they say, hey, I want to buy your listing. Can you write an offer for me or help me out or assist me with writing an offer? Let's be realistic for a second. Unrepresented buyers are a mess because you could tell an unrepresented buyer that came in your open house, yeah, sure, write an offer. What do you want to offer? Write it up and send it to my office. Here's my email. Email me your offer. And the buyer's going to say, well, where do I get the form? How do I do it? How do I write it up? What's customary? They're helpless. So here we have this line, additional compensation as seller's broker if buyer is unrepresented. Okay, so this kind of takes into consideration dual agency, but this verbiage kind of stinks too because why don't they just add on to this and rather than just say unrepresented buyer, because this takes into consideration that an unrepresented buyer is a headache and it's going to need guidance and make the listing broker effectively a dual agent. But they just say unrepresented buyer. Well, what if the listing agent wants to represent the buyer and be a dual agent? It just says unrepresented. That's it. Now, this allots a compensation amount for the seller's broker if the buyer is unrepresented. Okay, I guess that's fine, But what if the seller's broker wants to be or is going to be a dual agent? So this is missing half of what it should be doing. Either way, if you're filling this out, you should put a percentage here as if you're a dual agent. If you're charging 2.5% here, ideally put 2.5% here, or You could discount it, cut your seller a deal, and put 1% even. But this still is missing the dual agency aspect of it. By the way, if you know something I don't know, tell me, because this form, looking at it, and this form stinks. Not just because of this, but because the whole change, let me see if I can pull over an MLS listing here. The whole change in the MLS is that we're getting rid of the buyer's agent compensation and we're putting in a concession. Now, it can be a concession percentage, which would go here, or if the seller really doesn't want to show their cards, and by the way, through trial and error, this will all get streamlined. This won't be this much of a headache in the future. Agents are going to figure out the path of least resistance for the benefit of their seller clients, and this will all be streamlined. But we have this transition period where we might see listings where it says seller will consider concessions, and it's a yes or no. Maybe a seller doesn't want to say, yeah, I'll offer 2.5%. Maybe they're thinking, well, what if the buyer only needs 2% or 1%? So they might say yes and not say that they're offering a 2% concession. But this is the future. Concessions, will the seller consider concessions, yes or no? And if so, how much? That's the future. Why are concessions not on the listing agreement? The fact that concessions are not on this listing agreement makes this borderline worthless. Now, I've scrolled through a few times. It could be on here. Maybe I'm missing it. I'm missing it. But two things. Number one, if I can't find it that easily, that's a problem with the form. Number two, if it's on some other document, like this is an advisory, it could be on here. I highly doubt it. But if it's on some other form that needs to accompany this, then this form is a failure, because this should absolutely 100% take into consideration whether or not the seller is going to offer a concession. Why? Hey, it takes into consideration if there are leased items on the property, if certain fixtures are going to be included or excluded. It has all these investigations. I mean, this is just totally superfluous and absurd. Let me give you an example of why so much of this is fluff and unnecessary. Okay, so they have investigation reports, right? All right, fine, whatever. Do you need to have this on a listing agreement? Absolutely not. But is it helpful? Could be. And then they have natural hazard disclosure checked. Why? Why are you checking this now by default? See the red? It means by default this will be checked. Why? It's negotiated on the purchase agreement. The department in CAR that charges all these NHD vendors a bunch of money to put their name in the drop-down menu of your offer. Remember that? In your offer, you're writing an offer, you go to put in NHD, and you check whether or not it's environmental, you check who pays it, typically the seller, and then there's a drop-down menu on which company you choose. Those companies are paying CAR a lot of money. Maybe the department collecting all that money for CAR should tell the department making these forms, hey, we can't check this box here because we don't even know who the company will be until an offer comes in. Why are you saying the seller shall order and pay for a report within 5 days of the listing agreement if you don't have an offer and all these companies paying us money don't get chosen yet? Why? I mean, my point is you have all this stuff here, but you're leaving out the most important thing, which is if the seller is going to offer a concession, and yes or no, and if so, how much? This is a conversation that needs to take place during the listing period. This is something when a listing broker is putting this form together, that's a conversation they must have. Period. 100% absolute. They must have that conversation. It should be documented in here. If this form comes out and it does not take that into consideration, I will, as a broker, absolutely 100% create some sort of additional terms verbiage that I'll email out to the company, or even a supplemental document that addresses that, because this form is incomplete. This form is not acceptable without that. Because in theory, you as a listing broker could have a conversation with your client and say, hey, by the way, do you want to offer a seller concession? Yes or no? Yes. How much? 2%. Okay, where's that documented? I mean, it's absurd. So let me just finish this part right here. Now, if you know something I don't, please tell me. I just skimmed this morning for 10 minutes before I made this video because I'm looking at this the morning of July 10th and I'm scratching my head thinking, what are they thinking over there? What are they thinking? All right, continuation of right to compensation. This is that provision where if, let's say you have a listing that expires and the week after expires, someone that just toured the property while it was actively listed writes an offer, well, that protects you as a listing broker. So you should write in 30 or 60 or 90 calendar days. All right, that's fine, but it doesn't solve the problems where it's funny, CAR is exercising minimalism with the compensation, whereas everything else that they do, from their website to their forms to the application to edit forms, everything that has to do with CAR completely disregards minimalism, and it's a complete cluster of just unnecessary distracting. Have you navigated CAR's website? It's overwhelming. It's mentally overwhelming. It's information overload. There's zero regard for simplicity, yet they're exercising simplicity when it comes to compensation. Total fail of this form. And then down here, seller obligation to pay previous broker. All right, how often is that going to come up? Very, very rarely. So really, you have just 2 lines in the compensation section. Why? What's going on here? What happens if the listing broker's a dual agent? Why is it only if it's unrepresented? It's just, and of course the seller concession. This is just absurd. So I'm going through, I'm looking, where is it? Where is it? Now, as you know, these forms are structured where it's a grid up front, but it's all the same verbiage down here. This is a summary. The way the forms are, and I like the new format that they have, that they changed a while ago, where basically you have a grid or matrix format for key terms summarized here, and then the corresponding unabridged verbiage down here. But you're not going to find the compensation or the concession for the buyers down here. Yeah, I'm scrolling through. I don't see it. If you find it because I missed it, let me know, please. Please tell me I'm wrong about this form. I want to be wrong because I'm just looking at this thinking, why? Why are they making it so hard for us? This actually is. It's not that difficult to be compliant with the terms of the settlement, and also not make this a complete mess. Anyway, if you have any questions, please leave a comment. Thank you for watching.